And welcome back into another episode of the Bleav in Georgia Tech podcast. We're your co-hosts. That is RJ Schafer. I am Jackson Caudell coming to you on Wednesday night. I know it's been a little bit. We've had again. I'm sure we've explained enough for you guys. RJ covers the Detroit Tigers, who are on a roll right now. So congrats to all the success that's coming his way. So weren't able to do an instant reaction episode Saturday or a Monday episode. We do apologize for that, but we are coming to you on Wednesday night with our game preview for a game that I don't know if it interests Georgia Tech fans all that much that they're playing North Carolina this weekend. I can't think of a reason that it would interest any Georgia Tech fan why they would be playing North Carolina this weekend. But we'll preview the game anyway, and we'll talk about some things football and some things maybe not game related totally. But RJ, I know you got to be feeling good, man.
I'm feeling great. And if there just so happens to be fans that somehow are Georgia Tech and Tigers fans like me, you know, listen to Bleav in
We gotta
Tigers.
draw a Venn diagram of Georgia Tech and Detroit Tigers fans and put somebody in there with you, so you're not that one little dot that's just out there by yourself. So that's an interesting little subgroup. But yeah, you got to be feeling good. But I guess just before we start, I wanted to get your thoughts. Like I covered the game Saturday. I wrote plenty about it. Go check out Georgia Tech on SI. We do plenty of work over there. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the win against Duke. Just briefly talk about what you thought about before we get into the game on this Saturday against North Carolina.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that stood out to me, without saying, there were so many screens. Like I wrote it down in my notes 4 different times on how many screens there were. And a lot of them it was the same play. Like it was Malik Rutherford on that bubble screen. They called that same play around 4 times. I don't again, a win, a win is a win. I wanted to see more out of the offense, but what I think is happening is I think they're waiting to be more creative on offense. That's kind of been my
Yeah,
consensus throughout the year. But if it's working, it's working. Blake Rutherford was really solid catching the ball and in run blocking. I think that was an underrated part of that game. A lot of the big plays, especially to the outside, were Malik Rutherford setting the corner. He was really solid. Amari Harvey pick, that was one of the standout plays to me on defense. He read that play like a pro, got to the ball, sealed the game. But this was probably the most unique Georgia Tech offense, regardless of how I felt about it. I've seen all year. Very, very, very short gameplay, and then you obviously had the timely defense in the fourth quarter, and Duke kind of fell apart really in the fourth quarter.
yeah. But and I want to talk about. We've been talking about the struggles the past few weeks, but man, Jamal Haynes, that was the Jamal Haynes we know.
Yeah.
Like that was an awesome game. Running the ball over 200 yards rushing as a team. Jamal had, I think, 128 was the final stat line. And then we'll get into this in a little bit further, but man, the defense outside of that one busted play that went for 65 yards, the defense was pretty good. Like I'll say it was really good. And if you want to tell me that Duke offense is not good, I would agree with you. But a good performance is a good performance. And I do think the year over year, you know, how many times last year did we talk about maybe not great offenses or subpar offenses doing better than they should against Georgia Tech because the defense was playing below the standard? Now they have a defense that is, again, far from perfect, but it's definitely better. And I think Saturday showed that. And, they're going to have to show it again this Saturday. So, good win overall. I thought the atmosphere was good. Fans showed up that was really good to see. So, shout out to the fans. So, you ready to talk about this week?
Yes, sir.
All right. You want to start with offense or defense? I'll let you choose. Yeah, your team won today. You're feeling good.
Yeah, let's start with offense. Well, one thing I think we should mention, I don't know if we
Start with
thought about this
offense.
beforehand. Chad Alexander, running back, has been great this year. He got put on
Yeah,
scholarship this
okay.
week, and
That's
that was huge.
fantastic. Yeah, so like that's one of the bad things about recording at night. You have some things slip your mind. But yeah, Chad Alexander was put on scholarship yesterday, and man, like he deserves it so much. Like he has been running really hard this year. He has worked his tail off since he got to Georgia Tech, and he deserves a lot of credit for doing that. Like he's been a factor in the backfield this year, and you can see it on Saturdays. Like he works really hard, and Brent Key praised him a lot on Tuesday. Like he just one of the hardest workers on the entire team, and like that's really awesome for him. And just like I remember, I think I tweeted this like a long time ago. I think it was with Henry Freer. Like those kind of stories are just always awesome to see. Like I could, whether it's Georgia Tech or not, like I could watch videos or read stories about kids walk-ons getting scholarships just all day long like that. Like there's not a lot better than that in sports. And so like big shout out to Chad.
Yeah, and I think he silenced. If there is a Bleav in Georgia Tech, like key things that we talk about every single week, it has to be the running back too. And I think he has silenced those talks. I think
Yeah, for sure.
it's pretty fair to say he's set himself aside as the running back too. When before the season he wasn't even the player we had our eyes on.
No, not at all. And like that's those kind of stories are always awesome. So yeah, big shout out to Chad. And also I guess before we dig even further into football, we won't talk about it a ton on here because like it's it's media day, so it's like there's only so much you can really say. But Damon Stoudemire, Nate George, Kawasi Reeves, they were all up in Charlotte today for ACC basketball tip off. Again, I've got plenty of content on that over at Georgia Tech on SI. Didn't speak for long, but there's a little bit there. So we'll basketball season is getting close. Like I know we talk about football a lot right now because it's the main thing, but basketball season is getting close, and we're going to be talking about it just more and more and more. So if you want to read any about what they said at media day today, be sure to go over there and check all that stuff out. I think we're finally ready to talk about this game. I
think
think.
so.
So I guess let's okay. Let's go ahead and talk about the elephant in the room here. So the offense versus the North Carolina defense. I think we all know who coordinates the North Carolina defense at this point. Jeff Collins does. Look, I don't want to make this whole podcast about Jeff Collins and what this game means, but obviously, like it is a talking point, and like it's worth discussing. He and Brent Key both kind of played it down when they were asked about it this week. Like a North Carolina reporter, sorry, I don't know your name. I'm not familiar with everybody up there, but somebody asked him about his relationship with Brent Key, and he said, we've been friends for a long time. He kept it kind of short and sweet. So you can read into that if you want to. But, obviously he did hire Key back in 2019. And then, Key said, he wishes Jeff nothing but success except on Saturday. And he pretty much kept it at that. And he was asked some questions also about going against, coaches, he's worked with in the past. He said, it's not the first time I've done it. Like I don't think either coach really wanted to get into any of it at all. So any thoughts on the whole thing, or are you just ready to talk about the game?
Yeah, I think it's more of a minor storyline, but I think it is interesting to see it because I think after the game, we'll probably hear more from both coaches on how they really feel.
Possibly. We'll see how it turns out. But I just kind of wanted to lead off with that. But in terms of actual production and players on the field, this is going to be an interesting matchup because North Carolina's defense has not been good this year. Like I don't need to tell anybody that. They gave up 70 points to James Madison. Now, I guess what I do want to say about North Carolina as a team, for those that might not be aware, they did start the year off 3-0. They got wins over Minnesota, Charlotte, and NC Central. They have started reeling a little bit. It started with the disaster, I guess is one way to put it, against James Madison, where they gave up 50 points in the first half, 70 points total. They followed it up by a loss to Duke, who we all just saw last Saturday. They were ahead 20-0 in that game, and then they blew that lead entirely, and which I did after watching that Duke offense. I'm not trying to be mean. After watching that Duke offense Saturday, I cannot believe they let that happen. And then last week they lost to Pitt. Pitt's a pretty good team. One thing I do want to point out, especially after the James Madison loss, and sorry for those watching, I am going to give North Carolina a little credit here. They haven't quit yet. Like I was interested to see because, after the James Madison loss, you had all these stories about Mac Brown talking in the locker room about possibly retiring and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, man, that just does not seem like a good situation. And while they haven't won games, I'll give them a little bit of credit for not just totally collapsing. And they're still in these games. Like they had a lot of opportunity to beat Pitt last week. I watched that whole game to try to prep for this Saturday. And just to give them a little bit of credit. I don't think they've quit completely. So, again, I don't know how much you can factor in because they still lost the game. Like this is still not a very good football team. I don't think, but they still have some talent, but the defensive numbers just kind of are what they are. They are 15th in the ACC in yards per game allowed. They are 14th in points per game allowed. 112th, or I'll say 112th nationally in pass yards per game allowed, which could mean a big day for Haynes King in the offense. 10th in rush yards per game allowed, 52nd in the country. Like they're a very average run defense. They do have some guys that can get pressure on the quarterback. You know, Amari Campbell is a linebacker. I do think you need to know that they have some talent on the defensive side of the ball, but that's kind of been the story for the last few years. Like they just, whether it was Gene Chizik or whoever, like North Carolina has just not had very good defenses in the past, and I don't think this one is very good either. But like the numbers kind of speak for themselves. And then talking about Georgia Tech's offense, like I do want to say, like if you look at the underlying stats, which I'll show you here, courtesy of college football insiders, like I do, I know there has been some frustration with the offense, and I do see where that is coming from, especially like you said, like there does seem to be like maybe an over reliance on screens just a little bit, but the underlying numbers still look pretty good. They're 15th in EPA per drop back. They're still EPA rush is 35th in the country, and those are good numbers. Like those are not bad numbers. They're 24th in offensive success rate, 15th in drop back success rate. So I do want to point out that the underlying stuff is still pretty good, though I do completely understand some frustration with the play calling, because I do think it's not reaching the potential it could be. You're seeing missed opportunities like, last Saturday, the offense drives down immediately, scores, goes up 7-0. Defense gets a stop, and it's like, all right, let's go down the field and score. They don't do it. Then they get all the way back down the field, and you had the Jamal Haynes dropping the pass in the flat route, and then Haynes King played solid all night. I wouldn't say it's one of his best games, but he missed Chase Lane wide open in the back of the end zone. It just feels like there's some missed opportunities to really put more. And then pretty much from the second drive until the fourth quarter, the offense was kind of in a lull. And then they played pretty close to a perfect fourth quarter, I would argue, as far as offense. Like they got the 2 touchdowns. They won the game by 10 points. But I think obviously just if you look just right at the numbers, like I think the passing game is obviously something that stands out because, all this red for North Carolina's defense, that's tough. This isn't the worst defense that Georgia Tech has played all year, but it's certainly not the best. I mean, they are, as far as, defensive success rate, they are 44th. And I still think, honestly, some of these numbers are not as bad as they could be because of who they played early in the year. Minnesota is a dreadful offense. Like they are dreadful. And then, Charlotte and NC Central aren't going to add anything, but Pitt had a lot of success against North Carolina. Obviously, I think Eli Holstein, he threw for about 380 yards last week. James Madison, of course, had some success. Duke sort of kind of did. Like, I mean, they got it going in the second half, but, Star Thomas, he really got going. But I guess when you're looking at the matchup between the Yellow Jackets offense and the Tar Heels defense, what stands out to you?
Yeah, the one thing that stands out to me is, well, I guess I'll start off with the fact that I don't think this North Carolina defense is horrible. I think they have issues in the secondary, and I think that's where
Yes.
Georgia Tech can capitalize the biggest. Up front, they really aren't that bad. They sack at a fairly high rate, 7.39 sack percentage. That's top 10 in the ACC. That's 36th in the country in sack percentage. But looking at some of the other numbers, like defensive interceptions, they're 130th in the nation. They don't really contest with strong wide receivers at all or fast wide receivers. They're an average run defense. But what I think the game is going to come down to is the Tar Heels will get pressure. I'm not going to lie and say that they have a bad defensive line. But when you look deeper, Georgia Tech needs to get past the line of scrimmage. Once they get past the line of scrimmage, if Jamal Haynes can get through the first, rush of tacklers, I have no problem thinking he can have a huge game, or really anybody else for that matter. But it will depend on how you do in those scenarios, because I don't think the secondary is amazing, but I think the defensive line is probably the strongest point of this defense. I just don't think they have a whole ton
Yeah,
of
I don't even think it's close.
yeah.
Like, Jafari Ritzy, 5 sacks. Like I said, Amari Campbell has 3 sacks as well. Like they do attack and they do try to opponents. Like obviously it doesn't work all the time. But like I totally agree with you. I think when you look at the strengths of North Carolina's defense, I think you start with their defensive line. Their linebackers, I think, are okay. Like, they don't have Cedric Gray was on there before, and they don't have a guy like him. The secondary, I don't think is any good. We've seen Georgia Tech have some tough performances in the secondary. I think North Carolina is probably worse, I would argue. But I do think, Haynes King having success against this secondary, I think is very likely. And we've seen the passing game especially be funneled through Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton, who are still both in the top 10 in the ACC in yards as far as receivers go. I mean, Rutherford, 474 yards, 2 touchdowns. Eric Singleton, 380 yards, 2 touchdowns. Just really that, like, they really are one of the best duos in the entire ACC. And look, we haven't seen Chase Lane make as many plays lately. We haven't, they don't really dip into their depth much. Like, I do want to point out Bailey Stockton did get a nice third down catch last Saturday against Duke. I wonder, maybe if we see increased snaps for him, we'll kind of see how that goes. And then, Rylan Gode, he played a lot this past week, with Jackson Halls banged up and everything. So he didn't really see a ton from the tight end, but I know he got a lot of playing time. So um, I it was very encouraging coming into this game because we talked a lot last week about Duke's defense, and like I left that game still feeling fairly impressed with Duke's defense. Like it's a very attacking unit, and they really frustrated Georgia Tech, I think, for some parts of that game. But man, to see the running game do what it did last week, like that was to me super encouraging, and I'm sure you think so as well.
Yeah, and I think that could continue into this week against North Carolina because there have been teams, excuse me, who have had good rushing attacks, and I think that Georgia Tech has done a very good job at varying their rushing attack at times. There were some games where I feel like the rushing attack was one dimensional, but just talking about Chad Alexander earlier, talking about Eric Singleton, he has 7 carries on the year. Zach Pyron obviously comes in on the goal line sometimes. I just think there's a lot for Georgia Tech to do
Yeah.
offensively, especially running the ball.
Well, I was going to say, like last week, I think that was the most trouble we've seen them have doing QB run game. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, like 12 carries for 30 yards. That's not great for Haynes King, and that was, I think, another point of frustration. I think with people some people I do see talking about the offense is like, man, some of the QB run game isn't working, and it's keep going back to it, and I do get that, and shout out Zach Pyron though, like all that man does is score touchdowns. Like you bring him in and he's going to score touchdowns. But it was just super encouraging to see Jamal Haynes 128 yards on 19 carries, averaging 6.7 yards per carry, had a 39-yard rush in there, and then Chad Alexander, we talked about a little bit before. He had 10 carries, 59 yards. You can obviously see that's a 5.9 average. But seeing those two, it sounded like Trey Cooley and Trelane Maddox are still not going to play from what Brent Key said on Tuesday. I don't think he definitively ruled it out, but we haven't seen Trey Cooley pretty much all season. And then we knew Maddox was banged up coming into the Duke game. So just really encouraged by what we saw from the run game last week. And then, the offensive line, which it did give up a sack last week, only one. And it was kind of a, I don't think they didn't really get a lot of pressure. I think we talked about that. And I think that was some of the reason for the screen game is because we talked about how Manny Diaz likes to attack on defense and how he likes to send guys pretty much from every direction. I think it was more of getting the ball out quick so we don't get caught up in them in their blitzes and stuff. Again, I'm not saying it's not frustrating or excusing. I just like that was kind of the takeaway from it that I had watching is like that. I think they're just trying to make sure that Duke doesn't have time to send more and that they're not just sitting back on their heels waiting for anything. But the run game is obviously going to be very important. Like I want to see them continue to build off of it because, like, honestly, we haven't seen them have 2 really good games on the ground back to back because we all know they were frustrated running the ball against Syracuse. then, I mean, VMI is VMI. And they weren't able to run the ball against Louisville. You were able to run the ball last week against Duke. Like, are we back now? Because this was about the time last year when that running game really started to get cranked up.
And this is the part of the season where I think we could see a resurgence in a guy like Jamal Haynes, because it's not that he's been bad this year. It's kind of been that Haynes King has kind of overtaken the role. There's been games throughout the season where he's been the leading rusher. He's had the most carries throughout the game, whether that be due to, Jamal Haynes having some wear and tear, or Haynes King just having a ton of designed runs. It's not like he scrambles all the time. A lot of the times it's a QB draw, it's a QB power, it's this and that. But I think when you can put the ball in Jamal Haynes' hands more, you can trust Haynes King more in the pocket because he's not running at every play. So I think that can open up your offense more than people realize.
Yeah, for sure. What was I going to add to that? Like, I was going to add some. Oh, left tackle Corey Robinson played all the snaps last week. I'm sure you noticed that.
Yeah.
And Jordan Brown was not listed as a backup left tackle this week. He was listed as a backup left guard. So I do think true freshman Harrison Moore was listed on the depth chart as backup left tackle. I know the depth chart that they give out is not gospel. I'm not trying to say otherwise, but that's what was listed. And I do think that was noteworthy because Jordan Brown had his struggles. Like, he's a young kid. He's still learning. He's got room to get better for sure. But I do think it's worth pointing out that Corey Robinson did play all the snaps at left tackle. And I was here when he got here from Kansas a couple years ago. That was my first year covering the team. He has made a lot of improvements. Like, I do want to give him a little spotlight. Like, he's really grown a lot of the past couple years and developed into a good left tackle. But I do think that was worth pointing out. Anything else on offense, North Carolina defense? Anybody else you want to mention?
Nope.
Okay. Well, let's go talk about the number one rushing defense in the ACC, which does belong to Georgia Tech. Yes, that is correct. They have the number one rushing defense in the ACC. Now, are you ready for me to play devil's advocate with that? Just a little bit. And I'm not trying to, make anybody angry, but so I was doing some digging and, obviously I think we all know North Carolina has a pretty good running game. Amarian Hampton is the third leading rusher, not in the ACC, but the entire country. And that's in a normal year, he might even be first. But I think, for anybody that does follow all of college football closely, like Ashton Jeanty, what he's doing at Boise State is like superhuman right now. Like, he already has 1,000 yards. Like, that's the guy that Amarian Hampton is trailing right now. He has had an excellent season. But the Georgia Tech rushing offenses that they faced, the best one that they have faced was Louisville, who ranked 61st in rushing offenses. Nobody else ranks inside the top 100. And I want to preface this by saying I am not at all trying to take away from the improvement that the defense has made in stopping run. Like, it is absolutely night and day. Tyler Santucci and Jess Simpson both deserve a ton of credit for helping fix the run defense, the front seven especially. I just do want to give a little context. Like, this is by a pretty good margin the best running game that Georgia Tech has seen all season, because Georgia State is ranked 106th. Duke is ranked 112th. Syracuse is ranked 113th. And I couldn't believe this at the beginning of the year, but Florida State is ranked 132nd in rushing offense. The only team that has a per game basis worst rushing offense at Florida State is Kent State. That is not where you want to be at all. So that's just that surprised me a little bit. I didn't know that it was quite that bad. But that does give a little bit of context to some of the offenses that they've been facing, and just in terms of how the step up is. It's not. I'm not trying to shortchange the improvements that Georgia Tech has made, but I do think it is worth pointing out that they have not faced a good rushing offense in a little bit. But just, some other numbers on North Carolina, kind of, because besides the rushing offense, the rest of it is kind of, it's okay. Like, they have some talent, but this is the worst North Carolina offense we've seen in quite a bit, because, in the past, I know Georgia Tech was good against Drake May, but, they had some of the best offenses in the entire country. Before that, it was Sam Howell. Like, the drop-off in quarterback play is pretty significant. I'm sure everybody out there knows Max Johnson got hurt at the beginning of the year. Jacoby Criswell, who started at North Carolina, transferred to Arkansas, and is now back at North Carolina. he's now the starting quarterback, and he's fine. Like he's not terrible. He's not great. Right now, he has a little bit over 1,100 yards, which is 11th in the ACC, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. They have one of the they've given up 11 sacks this year. He's been sacked 7 times. Uh, their quarterbacks as a whole have been 11. So can this pass rush finally get going against one of the lesser offensive lines in the ACC? They're 50th in the nation in passing offense, which is 9th in the ACC. They're 60th in the red zone. They have the second best rushing attack in the ACC. They have the number 30 total offense in the country in terms of yards per game, which is good for 6th in the ACC. And like I said, Hampton is kind of the engine here. He's had only one game all year where he hasn't had 100 yards, and that was against Charlotte. And I watched that game, and trust me, Charlotte is a horrible football team. And then North Carolina kind of took them out pretty early. And I think it was they didn't want to give Hampton too many carries. So he's had an excellent season. Their receivers are, okay. Like J.J. Jones, 18 catches, 300 yards, 1 touchdown. They have a dangerous group of tight ends. Like, I do want to say that about them. That this is probably the best group of tight ends that Georgia Tech has faced this year. Bryson Nesbitt is the guy I think most people know. 21 catches, 242 yards, 3 touchdowns this year. And then, like I said, they're 76th in the nation in sacks given up. So I want to see if this run defense is for real, of course. And I do believe it is better, but is it, hey, you're number one in the ACC. Like, can you take a one-dimensional, maybe one-dimensional is too hard a word for the offense, but like, can you take a run-centered offense, take away their best part, and make Jacoby Criswell beat you? Like that's something that I'm very much interested in seeing. So I guess what stands out to you about this matchup right now?
To me, I guess the biggest thing to add on to what you were saying earlier, Georgia Tech really hasn't faced a very good, run defense the whole year. And one very important stat to add with that, Georgia Tech is second in the nation in opponent rushes per game, meaning teams do not run the ball against Tech at all. And I think that's really for the fact that they have had so much success, in the pass defense. This team is going to run the ball a lot. On average, teams run the ball 26 times against Georgia Tech a game. North Carolina runs the ball almost 40 times a game, 38.4, which is top 40 in the nation. I just want to see how Georgia Tech can deal with that from a gameplay standpoint, but also from a wear and tear standpoint, because it's hard to go 4 quarters against a team that's running the ball 10 times a quarter with one of the best running backs in college football. Like, he will wear you down. I mean, if you get him down in the first quarter, sure, great. It's going to feel good. The fourth quarter is probably not going to feel the same.
As the game goes on. Like, he's like, I know maybe that gets thrown around for a lot of running backs, but it is true. Like, that dude gets better as the game goes on, and he's an NFL back. Like, he will be starting at some point in the NFL. I feel like so. He's an excellent player. Brent Key said as much. Like, he made sure to point him out the other day at his press conference. But like I said, like, would you agree with me that the goal here is to limit him and then force Jacoby Criswell to hit the throws against the secondary?
I mean, you have to. But the question is, can you even really limit him, because he is that high level of a player? Like, he'll probably be the best player in the field on Saturday. Is that crazy?
No, probably not. Like, it's him or Haynes King, one of those two,
Yeah.
I would argue. So both really good players, both having excellent seasons, both probably should be on all ACC teams at this point. Like, I would say him and Tootin at Virginia Tech are probably your top 2 backs in the ACC right now. I think we all know some of the stats on the pass defense. Like, it's not great, and they're 116th in the country in sacks. And last week was their first interception. I thought Saeed Gibbs had the first interception in that first half, but you had that garbage holding call, which I know sent people into a frenzy, and I frankly agree with it. There were some calls, especially at the end of that first half of the Duke game, which were horrible. But yeah, they only have one interception. It's I remember saying last week, and pretty much, I mean, a lot of what I've been saying this year, the offenses that really worry me against Georgia Tech's defense are teams that have a good quarterback, good weapons, and I trust them to have good play calling and a good organized passing attack because the pass rush for Georgia Tech. Now they did affect the quarterback a little bit last week. Like they Jordan, and I want to shout out just defense. Jordan Vandenberg has been awesome. He has gotten better each and every week. You can see it just with your own eyes. If you look at PFF grades, like he has really done a good job this year, just improving week over week, and like he deserves a ton of credit for the work he's done. Tay Seymour is another guy. He really stepped up last week and made some plays. And then, like you said, Amari Harvey. But there have been plays to be had against the secondary. I think the question is Jacoby Criswell and this crew enough to cause some issues? Because I remember saying last week, like, Malik Murphy has a little bit of talent. They have Jordan Moore, who is one of the top, statistically one of the better receivers. He was taken out of the game. He was not the one that was hurting him. It was some other guys last week. So, Bryson Nesbitt is the guy I'm going to come back to a lot. I want to see how they haven't gone against like a really athletic pass catching tight end. He is another guy I think that's going to play on Sundays. So I'm really interested to see how they match up against him. That's probably a responsibility for linebackers and safeties. We'll see how that goes, whether it's Clayton Powell-Lee. I would assume maybe the safeties get a little bit of work on him because like we've talked about it a little bit. The linebackers coverage is not the strength of that unit at all. So I don't know that you're going to get a ton of one-on-one time there. Like you might see Clayton Powell-Lee or Seymour or Lamiles Brooks get some one-on-one time with him. But this is not the kind of offense that, I talk about scaring me as much. And, that, but also, I've talked about, Georgia Tech wanting to face lesser passing attacks, and you're getting one of those here, but still they have some talent on the outside. It's not a given at all, especially when you have a running back like Amari Hampton, especially if he gets going. Like you're going to have to crowd the box a little bit more, and that might open up some one-on-one looks. And I think Duke was trying that early in that game last week because they got a pass interference on Rodney Shelley on that very first drive. Like they were trying to take some shots, it didn't work. Like I said, you had that one penalty later in the first half, but I do think you're going to, especially if they have some success, they have some guys that can go one-on-one, but it's, can they win? I don't know. North Carolina's receivers don't scare me a bunch.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that I'd like to add, I think this is, again, playing an all-American level player is not something you want to do. But if Georgia Tech had to pick a team that has an all-American level player to play offensively, I think it would be North Carolina. I think they do match up pretty well. Again, we saw against Duke. Well, one player I want to mention is the Saeed.
Or did we lose RJ? I think we lost RJ. But kind of piggybacking off what he was saying right there, I think, Saeed Gibbs is a guy that's played a little bit, or I'll say a lot, and, he's been getting better each week. Like I know some of the PFF, grades look just a little bit rough and everything, but he's a guy, we've been talking about making plays. And when you look at some of the numbers here, like, the offensive success rate for North Carolina is lower. So, they're 75th in the country, 84th in rushing success rate, 59th in drop back success rate. EPA margin is only 63rd in the entire country. So they're not an efficient group. And, we talked about them playing against Pitt last week, and I think we were mainly talking about the offense and, what Eli Holstein, the Pitt quarterback, was able to do. But Pitt also has one of the worst defenses in the ACC, and like North Carolina couldn't find really any consistent success against them. So that was something that I did take note of. Like they, moving the ball, consistently against Pitt was not really at the strength last week. So, I think this is, one of the lesser offenses that Georgia Tech has faced. That doesn't mean they're going to stop them. Like that doesn't mean they can't make plays. But in terms of talent, just everywhere across the field, Amari and Hampton is obviously the key point in all that there. And then, we've talked a lot about the passing game, but I do think, we need to talk. I want to talk a little bit more about the offensive line because this is, if you can control the line of scrimmage and get a pass rush and run defense and whatnot, that's welcome back, RJ.
Yes, sir.
What were you saying before? You were talking about Syed Gibbs and then you froze.
Oh, I was saying, I'm not one to talk about refs. I thought that was good coverage on that play, but I think this is the dream matchup. I'm not sure if I said it.
You did a little bit, yeah. But yeah. So I think that Georgia Tech's defense actually does have some advantages in this game. I think it all comes down to, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, is just slowing Hampton down. Like he's probably going to rip some runs here and there, but making sure that they have some success on early downs, forcing down and distance against North Carolina is always, I think, something that can get you into success. Like you can, look at their numbers a little bit. Or third and fourth down success. Their offense is 91st in success rate on third and fourth down. Like that shows you if you can stop them on the early downs. They don't have success when they have to throw. Like this is not a team that really likes to throw the ball a lot. And I think Georgia Tech can have some success. So, kind of wrapping up on that point, I think that this is not a game that should be taken lightly. Like this was something I want to talk about because yes, I know they have lost 3 in a row. I know that, a lot of people want to win this game because Jeff Collins is on the sideline. I don't envision North Carolina rolling over all that much. Like, and I want to include like Georgia Tech has beaten North Carolina 3 years in a row, and they've all been big upset wins. Now you have to go on the road as a favorite and beat a team that has lost 3 in a row. They're going to want to get this game for a number of reasons, whether it is stopping the win streak. I'm again. I know they downplayed it earlier this week, but I have a hard time believing that Jeff Collins is not a little motivated to not try to win this game. Welcome back, my friend.
Yeah, we're having some technical difficulties. I froze here for 2 times in the past 3 minutes.
Cleveland Guardians have found and gotten a hold of RJ.
Yeah, they're holding me hostage after the Tigers win.
Yeah, exactly. But do you have any other thoughts on the offense versus defense matchup there? North Carolina's offense versus the Tech defense.
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to say and get out was again, it's a dream matchup for Georgia Tech, but I think we will see North Carolina change up their offense a little bit and maybe rely on Jacoby more at the quarterback position because I think this could be the game where you start to see Amari and Hampton struggle. So this could be a big statement game for the Georgia Tech defense.
Yep, I agree with you. So I was making the point that I don't think that North Carolina is going to roll over in this game, and I know a lot of people really want to win this game and they really want to kill North Carolina. And look, I get it. I don't think that North Carolina is a bad team on paper. Like I know the James Madison game was really bad, but like I said, they have really fought hard the last couple of weeks, and I anticipate them doing that. They are at home. They have lost 3 in a row to Georgia Tech. They've lost 5 of the last 6. Like it's not just 3 in a row. North Carolina has not beaten Georgia Tech in Chapel Hill since 2016. Like think about that for a little bit. And these teams played every year in the ACC Coastal. So that's a pretty like shocking stat when I tell people like Georgia Tech owns North Carolina. Like I can't explain it, but they do. So they're going to want to win this game. And then I was kind of saying like I know it's been downplayed this week, at least amongst the coaches and stuff, but I have a hard time believing that Jeff Collins is not a little motivated to try to win this game. Like I just that should be pretty plain to say. But for final score predictions, I do think that Georgia Tech has a lot more advantages than North Carolina does. I am a believer in the run defense being improved. I'm very intrigued to see how much improved because, again, this is going to be a test, just going skill on skill. Like Marion Hampton is good. Like I've said his name a lot on this pod. I can keep saying like he is a very good player. He's the best running back that Tech has faced by a very large margin. But this defensive line, as far as run defense goes, has really done well. And you're going against an offensive line that I don't think is very good. Obviously, they give up a lot of sacks. not always efficient when running the ball. Like Hampton has put up some really gaudy numbers, but there are some games where he's not as efficient running the ball. Like he got a lot of carries against Duke, and he had like a bad yards per carry average. So like I don't think that's a great unit overall. And while like I think the Georgia Tech secondary has some issues, I don't think this is a passing attack that scares me. I picked Louisville to win a couple weeks ago strictly for that reason. North Carolina and Louisville's passing offenses are two totally different things. It was the main reason, I said I don't think Duke can move the ball a lot because I don't think they have a quarterback and some weapons that can consistently challenge Georgia Tech. And I think I would make the argument that Duke's receivers are better than North Carolina's. Like, is Jordan Moore better than anybody that North Carolina has at receiver? I would argue so. Like Bryson Nesbitt's a very good player, but on the outside, I don't know. I'm sure you'll see a lot of double coverage coming Nesbitt's way. And then this North Carolina secondary, it might be the worst one in a game in this game, and that should tell you something. So I Bleav the offense is going to have success moving the ball consistently. I really encouraged to see the run game get going last week. I like Georgia Tech to win this game 38-24.
I think I'm going to go down a similar path. I just don't see North Carolina being able to score a lot of points in this game, frankly, for the fact that their offense is centered around the run. Beginning of the game, when it's working, they're running the ball. End of the game, when it's not working and they're down and they need a score, they're going to run the ball. I don't think Jacoby Criswell is talented to the point to where he could take Georgia Tech off guard. I think he's a serviceable quarterback. I think he's good at his job. I don't think he's a game-breaking player to where he's going to put up 35 points on his own and he's going to go for 500 yards. I just don't see a lot of opportunities for North Carolina to score a lot of points. How they're going to stop Georgia Tech offensively, I think Georgia Tech does way too much on offense. I think they have way too many weapons. I'm going to go a similar score prediction, but I'm going to say North Carolina doesn't score as many points. I'm going to say Georgia Tech 38, North Carolina 17.
Yep. And hey, we'll see what happens. I'm very intrigued by this game. And, like I said, I still think North Carolina is going to show up and have fight. Like, I don't think they've quit just yet. Like, maybe they do in the future. But as of right now, I still think they're playing pretty hard. So I expect a fight on Saturday. But, look, Georgia Tech's favored on the road. Like that's we saw that. And we saw it against Syracuse earlier this year. So just be aware. Better team than North Carolina. But that's, neither here nor there. But any other thoughts before we get out of here, my friend?
No, sir.
All right. Well, I'm making my first trip ever up to Chapel Hill. I leave tomorrow. I look again, plenty of content over at Georgia Tech on SI if y'all want to go read it. I appreciate the support y'all show over there, but I also appreciate the support that y'all show here. Like we've really grown a lot, and I really can't say enough about it. If you're watching on YouTube, we really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment below. We love seeing what you got, what feedback is with you guys. It really helps us grow and really helps us, talk about the things y'all want to talk about, analyze the game, just talk about the different things that y'all want to do. So we really appreciate that. If you're listening on podcast form, just follow us over there. Download all that kind of good stuff. The stuff that y'all know that y'all do. Like it's like y'all know y'all do it and y'all do a good job of it. So we really thank you a lot. But that's it for me. Is it for you?
Well, one last thing we didn't mention. We hit 600 subscribers. We asked for that.
We did hit,
and you guys completely delivered.
Yes, absolutely. So when I last checked, I didn't see it. It was below 600. So that's why I didn't say anything about it. I was just giving the pep talk. Like, hey, now we got to get higher now. Like that's 600. We will not be satisfied with that. Like, no, sir. We will do everything we can to keep growing. And like I said, there's plenty of more stuff on the way. Football, we got basketball season coming up. It's going to be fun. And like I said, I'll be up in Chapel Hill. The plan is to do an instant reaction on Saturday. We'll see how it all plays out. RJ might be celebrating in the streets of Detroit still at that time if they win tomorrow. So like I hope he's still with us if that happens. But appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you next time.